I just have to mute it once it goes on. All right. I'd like to call the January 14th meeting, virtual meeting to order. It is 6:32 p.m. If you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any additional items for consideration for the agenda?
No, we will have 2.2, we will have an amendment.
Okay. Do we want to put that in there now?
Sure. So I'd like to amend the wording on 3.5 to read, amend the previously adopted motion from the July reorg meeting to reflect the updated IRS mileage reimbursement rate to 56 cents per mile, down 1.5 cents from the rate for 2020, effective January 1st, 2021.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Yep. Can I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I'll move.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 10th regular meeting and the special meeting of December 14th? I'll move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The consent agenda is 3.1 through 4.1. That includes the treasurer's report, consideration of claims, transportation report, cafeteria report, mileage reimbursement, surplus equipment, audit, and old policies. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as recommended by the superintendent? I'll move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
That brings us to community participation already. Wow, that was quick, wasn't it? Community participation, since we are all online. We'll give a couple extra seconds for those of you watching us. Please type in the chat now if you have. Actually, they can't, Chris. It's been disabled. Hold that thought, everybody. Okay. I see it now. All those that would like to participate in community participation, the chat is now available. Please do so now.
Michelle, did you group 4.1 into that last motion?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see no participation at this time. We'll have another chance later. So if you have anything, please make sure you put it in the chat now so that we can bring it up during our next community participation. That brings us to personnel. We have an appointment. I need a motion to approve the appointment of Kristen Manwaring as a probationary part-time teacher aide effective January 19th through June 25th, as recommended by the Director of PPS and the Superintendent.
I'll move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 6.2, I need a motion to approve the recommendation of the committees on special education and preschool special education.
So moved.
Second, anybody?
I'll
Second.
second. I think Ellen was, but she's muted.
Okay. Any discussion for that would be in exec session. So we will move on. Oh, no, we didn't. We need to vote then. So all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. If a chat is disabled, just refresh your whole page and you should be able to get it. I refreshed mine and it popped up on the side. So give that a try. We just had something pop in. Brings us to a discussion on the following policies that have to be reviewed annually. Currently, they're just grouped with all the other policies, and board action is taken in the reorg meeting. Going forward, the board needs to decide if that's the way to continue or if we'd like to do them separately. That involves the code of conduct, the investments, purchasing, student attendance, and parent and family engagement. Go ahead, Travis.
So I'm the one that started digging into this, and I think it's on here because of the questions I was asking. So here's kind of where my mind is at. I came across a document on required Board of Education policies and notifications from BOCES. I'm not sure if you guys have that. I'm sure Debbie can share it with you. But from that document is where these annual policies are spelled out. For me, it basically comes down to interpretation of both the law and wording in some of these policies. I also have concerns with some policy compliancy, but again, it comes down to interpretation. So I wanted to see what you guys felt. My question to you guys is, during the reorganizational meeting, when we take action on a motion to readopt the HCS Board of Education policies in effect during the previous year, do you consider that a review of all policies as well, or just a readoption? Because I don't consider that a review.
So I have to agree with you, Travis. And I think if these have to be reviewed every year, maybe the thing that makes sense is to put them on the June agenda each year as being reviewed in June, so that we do our second read at the July reorg or at the July meeting. And then these particular ones that have to be reviewed annually can be adopted.
Yeah.
To answer your question about reviewing the policies, this is actually something we started last year. So as you now know, there is the spreadsheet that shows all of the policies when they were last reviewed. And there's really sort of a concerted effort this year to be reviewing a certain number of policies every month, because we were recognizing that many of them had not been read.
You're saying the reviewing policies more frequently started last year?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So I've looked, some other schools don't even readopt their policies, at least during the reorganizational meetings. Other schools have separate agenda items where they either group these policies individually for review or kind of group them all together. But so there are, of these policies listed, I don't feel readoption of all policies complies with them. So here, policy 4330 on investments. In it, it says, each year the board shall review this policy and note that review in the minutes of the meeting at which it occurs. So again, it comes down to interpretation. I think the meaning of that policy is it needs to be reviewed individually. Policy 4510 on general procurement standards. It also calls for an annual review. And policy 7005 on student attendance is similar. It actually calls for an annual review. However, it doesn't state to review the policy, rather to review attendance records and make revisions deemed necessary. So that's it. Ellen, I get your take on it. I just think be safe in case anything ever came down to it, and to comply to at least those 3 policies, that whether it's a reorganizational meeting or a June meeting, they need to be reviewed individually, separate from the readoption.
I agree.
I just want to say too that review means that we don't have to do a first read and a second read. Review is just the board reviews them. I put it in the minutes as being reviewed, but there's no first and second action on each or any of those policies.
I don't think it would hurt to do them in June, though. Like, I think that would be an ideal time to do it. But I'm glad we don't have to do a first and second read in that sense. I mean, we always could if we needed to, but
Right.
thanks,
Now,
Debbie.
Especially the ones that haven't been reviewed since 2009. Seems like
Yeah.
a lot of them, yeah.
we might want to
Debbie-
first and second read.
But
Debbie,
those
on the,
dates are when they were revised. If they're reviewed,
were,
it wouldn't
okay.
change those dates, correct?
You're right.
Yeah, those are revised dates.
Yeah.
Right. Debbie, on the investment policy where it says that the review has to be noted in the minutes, does that have to be noted for that specific policy? How do we do that?
When I spoke to Jen from BOCES, my contact at BOCES, she said, I told her exactly how we do it, and we do it in the reorg meeting, and she says that's sufficient, but it's up to the board on how they want to do it. If they want to do it individually, we can do it individually. But she said with me doing it the way I'm doing it in the reorg meeting, it's fine, but it's the board's decision on what they want to do.
So again, it goes to that interpretation you were talking about, Travis.
Yeah. I guess my point is I just want to comply with at least those 3 policies.
Mhm.
So either we comply with them or change the wording in the policies, one of the two, or just, make an additional agenda item at some point during the year to review them. That's all.
I think it's important for the policy committee to figure out which other ones we need to and put them into a meeting and get them going. And if it needs to be a
Yes.
yeah. So,
Well, the only ones that have to be reviewed annually are the ones listed that Travis is talking about. There's only 8 of them that have to be done annually.
So I think, in my mind, it goes to the policy committee. You guys are the ones that are reviewing policies to begin with. So if you think it's fine as a committee, as a subcommittee to keep it the way we're doing it, great. Just let us know. And if you think it's something that needs to be done in a different way, then great. Then let us know and let's move it to a different way.
Okay. So are you saying that as the policy committee, we'll talk about this and make our suggestions, and at a future meeting, we'll figure out what to do?
That's how I feel. Corey,
I feel the same way, Michelle.
Okay. Corey, are you on policy too? You are, right? Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Debbie, thank you
Perfect.
for looking into all that too.
And thank you too, Travis.
You're welcome.
Great. All right. So more to come on that from the policy committee, but very important to bring up. So thank you. That brings us to another discussion with a possible recommended action. Jen, I'm going to turn this one over to you since you submitted it for the agenda, just so that you can take it from there.
Okay, so I saw this in one of the correspondences that we received, and then I dug into it a little bit more on NISPA's website, and I had seen this line in there saying that every board should have an advocacy liaison, and it was something that in my time we've never really discussed, but I think more now than any time, I think that it's something that could be really beneficial to us, and I think it's something that we really should stay on top of. So I basically copied the line from the correspondence of the email that we received to be able to discuss it. And I don't know if it's something that somebody is like, yes, I absolutely want to be in this position if we feel we even need this position, but it is something that's highly recommended.
Jen, if I could, I think it's extremely important to have this position right now, especially with the lack of consistency at state ed we need as much advocacy as we can at the legislative level from our boards, because it's just not happening out of state ed right now. So I think it's extremely important that we have a representative.
Debbie, do you know if we've ever had one of these before?
I don't recall having one before, no.
But again, it seems like the appropriate time to bring it on board, right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I was just curious
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
it might have worked before if we've had one.
I fully support having one, but will also say that I cannot volunteer to be
person.
that right now. Another year? Yeah. I mean, it actually sounds interesting, but
Jennifer, Jen, did you have interest in it?
It's something that I have to say, like, I don't know that I have a ton of background knowledge in, but I would love to learn more about it. And I did have Debbie register me for the Capitol Conference. So I'm going to be taking time to attend that, to learn more about kind of what's happening. So, I mean, I'd give it a shot. I can't tell you how it's going to go, but I'd give it a shot unless there's somebody else that has some background and is really amped to take it on.
Corey Travis?
I think this is, I agree. This is a really crucial time. So, and I think Jen would be great. So I'd support that.
I don't think I have the personality for it.
I think it's great, Jen, if you want to give it a shot and let us know what your thoughts are as you go through, and then we can keep this on. Debbie, can you put this position on too for the reorg meeting so that we can remember to put somebody in the spot in July? Hopefully Jen again, but so we can have consistency. But if she says it's somebody else's turn, then we can do that as well. So
Do we need to make a formal appointment?
Yes. Yeah, we will in a second. Just wanted to make sure that we get it on the notes for July.
Right. I'll put it on for the reorg as
Okay.
well.
Or
One thing I think is
it's getting
important.
longer.
One thing I think that's important for this is coordinating those efforts through Bill and Matt, because I think Matt said this many times that sometimes the positions for the larger BOCES area or even the NISBA is not the same as what's the best interest for Hamilton. So trying to make sure we have that balance would be good.
Absolutely.
Great. Good thought, Corey. Any other discussion? If not, I can do a motion. But I felt like we should cover all the discussion first. All right. So a motion to appoint Jen as the NISBA advocacy liaison for the 2020-2021 school year.
I'll move.
I'll move. I'll second.
Ellen moved, I second.
Is there any other discussion other than thank you, Jen, for bringing this forward and for raising your hand to be a part of that for this time?
Thank you, guys.
No. Once this gets going, Jen, would you share that with your knowledge sharing? How would we kind of learn about these things?
Yeah, I can do it through knowledge sharing.
Or we can
I think
put
it's
it on-
something that we definitely need to stay on top of.
Do you want to put it on under information and correspondence and just leave it there as a number? We'll make a 7.7. And then if you don't have anything every month, then or in a month, you could just say nothing to discuss.
That sounds good.
Debbie, does that work for you? Please and thank you.
Would that go under knowledge sharing?
That's what I
It
was-
could. I just want to make sure that we don't,
It may be more active than knowledge sharing, right? I mean, if there's something we need to be doing to be advocating or
I worry if we leave it as knowledge sharing, and I don't know. I
can add
think-
it. It's not a big
I
deal.
think just throwing it in as NISBA liaison
Okay.
would be good, just so that it's a definite point of something to speak about.
Could we
Okay.
make it just a general advocacy sharing in case Bill and Matt have anything to share in regards to their efforts to
Sure.
I guess I'm making it more complicated. I'm sorry.
Okay. Other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right. That brings us to community participation, and hopefully everybody's able to participate now.
No, administrator reports.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
All
scrolled.
seven, Michelle.
I scrolled too far. Got excited. All right, so forget that. You can still add something if you want to. Anybody out there? We'll get to you, I promise. Administrator's report. So we'll start with Kevin because he's at the bottom of my screen.
Just really busy. Well, good evening, by the way. Just very busy. It's the heat of the season for us. We're looking at budgets in special education. I had mentioned, for planning for next year for special education, you're trying to put together a budget based off of recommendations you haven't had yet. So it's a tricky time to try and plan for next year in special ed. And really the only way you can kind of get close to planning well is to have lots of meetings with families, with teachers, with various groups to kind of get a feel for where our kids and what their needs are going to be for next year. So it's a busy planning time for that. And at the same time, we're in the height of doing observations of teachers. So, there's also annuals going on at this time. We're just starting them and really starting to gear up for annuals. Every student has an annual each year. So, we have about 100 of those. So it's a busy time. We're getting right into the busy season. So outside of what I have done in my report, I really don't have anything new to add. But if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. And the last thing I'll say is I met with Bill and Matt about staffing for next year, as all of the administrators have. And one of the things that we've noticed this year is that the number of what they call live births for next year, it's kind of a disturbing term, but the better way of looking at it was the babies that were born in 2017. Those would be our pre-Ks next year. So there were only 27 births that year, and that's 8 less than we've ever had going back as far as the data would go. So that's not encouraging. Hopefully we had many people move into the district, but it's something to keep an eye on. Bill's asked me to do a little report on that next month, so I'll have something prepared for you for next month about the numbers over the years and where the numbers are now. So,
Kevin, do you have any other ideas of how to approach families if these surveys aren't coming back in? I mean,
well, it's tricky, Ellen. Other than nudging them, here's the tricky part. So every family, and what you're talking about, we kind of shifted here. We've got our education survey that's out called Indicator 8, where we need to get at least 50% of our special education families to respond to. It's a state requirement. We're up to, I think, 18 have been turned in, which is about 30. We have to have half of the parents turn them in. So we're about 36% of the way to our goal. It's tricky. I mean, we can nudge families, and we do that. We send out emails, and I put something in the newsletter. I'll put something in each board report reminding. So what's tricky about it is that each family is assigned a number through the state. So when we sent the packet home to all the families, they have that number. Now, if they've thrown that report out, they no longer have a number to log on to do the report. So I have to order a new form for them. So that's the tricky part, and that was explained in the cover letter that went home. So this is typical. The state tells us ahead of time that you have to have some really. They don't tell you how to do it, but they say mailing them home, giving them out at CSE meetings. Those aren't the best ideas. To try and be as creative as you can. And honestly, I don't really know any other creative idea outside of going to somebody's door and knocking on it and handing them to them.
Is it something somebody could do on a phone with them and review it with them and do it with them to help?
Yeah. As soon as Cap is freed up a little bit here, my secretary, I would definitely have her call families to kind of nudge them, and I'll support them if they want me to work with them through that. I don't think I really should be that involved with it, because they're giving feedback on how the CSE process is going, so they want to be.
Again, I guess I'm thinking about situations like, I know one of the things that exists is, I don't know if student teachers are coming into the school. I don't know if there are students who need volunteer activities, if there are education majors who are interested, and would that be a role to bring in sort of an outside volunteer who might be able to connect with people and maybe, I don't know if that's even an option. I just don't.
Right.
Well, it's possible. And we don't have student teachers in the building right now, but from time to time we have aides that are available that might be able to help with that.
I guess, all those kids that would have been student teachers might be looking for an opportunity to do something education related that would be, a resource that would not drain from the school's resources, where people are already doing more than they normally do. And
it's kind of like the census. If you think of it like that, maybe some people going out and knocking on doors and reminding them. It's just tricky in that if they don't have that identification number that was in their envelope, that's going to make things. We'll just order them a new one. But I think we have until the end of August, so we've got a little bit of time. We'll see where we are in a couple of months, and then we'll start putting the heat on to try and get things back in. Thanks.
Other questions for Kevin? All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. Heather, you're up next on my screen.
Good evening. So at the end of December, before we left for the winter break, we had a lot of projects that were in the works that we kind of wrapped up, and coming back into the first couple of weeks of school this January, we have a lot of projects that we're in the startup phase at this point in time. So we're kind of, really we're at the beginning parts of lots of different projects. So one of those is we're going to call it HCS Reads, but other people might know it as a One School, One Book program. And this is where in the elementary, we're all going to read one book together, and then we'll have remote students participate via the learning platforms, and then also we'll be building on that for the hybrid students in the classroom. So really grateful for the steering team input on this project, as well as the PTO. And we had our first meeting on Wednesday, and we've been talking about titles. We're super excited about this project because it really does give an opportunity for the whole school to come together and think of just creative, fun ways around literacy, which, as you all know, is near and dear to my heart. So I'm really excited about this. I can't wait. And we're planning that for right after winter break. We would like to begin the active process of that. So something to kind of get us through the tail end of winter. Speaking of winter, we already are here with doing our winter assessments. So they are in full swing right now. Students are taking the second NWEA assessment, and we're doing that in grades 2 through 5. Really interested in looking at that data. Last spring, I think that was one of the things that was most disturbing to me as a reading teacher, is I just didn't know where students landed. So we were able to kind of get a baseline data point in September, and now I'm really anxious to see this next one. And NWEA is standardized tests that will allow us to see growth over this first 2 quarters. So looking forward to taking a look at that. We also are planning for February 10th our data team meeting in ELA, and that's when we will go through every single student in the school for ELA scores, taking a look at their growth, if their services are matching up with their needs at that point in time, and what we can do to, really make sure we are individualizing their program. So we're very excited about that too coming up. And then also we're doing our Fountas and Pinnell benchmarks. So we will have 2 data points for that ELA data team meeting. Something fun we're putting together after the idea, Carrie Stoddard came up with this idea for random acts of kindness in the faculty staff for the month of February. So we just kicked that off literally today, and tomorrow we'll be doing that with each other. And we hope that that will in turn spread to students as they see, the adults in the building really supporting each other. We have I think I included the picture in my board report so you can see we're going to display that in the hall. And the idea is, sometimes students will really look at what adults do more than what they sometimes say. So we're really hoping to model that for students. Other winter activities, recess has really been ramped up with the advent of snow. So it's been really fun for students. And then right when we came back from the winter break, we started a rotational basis of using the playground, which is super successful. So again, Carrie's put together a rotating basis where just one cohort will go out on the playground at a time. And that's been really fun. We're also looking at purchasing some sleds to do sledding activities for the winter as well. And then we have put together the pre-K and K initial registration paperwork for families. So we're looking at collecting those applications. And like Kevin had mentioned, we're looking at the incoming pre-K program and what that will look like. One other thing is we're continuing with our math team, looking at some different math curriculums. So I set up just recently 2 Google Meet presentations for 2 different curriculums so that we're going to take a look at those. And then we have 2 others that we're going to be investigating also. So lots of new projects. Really happy to be back at school. I think, the break was great for everybody. And now everybody has come in and, ready to get to work with some new ideas.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather?
I just have a quick
Heather,
question.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Jen, you go.
Sorry. With the random acts of kindness, is that just an elementary school effort or is that a full school effort?
I think right now it's elementary school, but Mark, I think the high school did something along those lines, right? Earlier in the year?
Yeah, the counselors had that a week of that earlier in the year in the secondary.
Okay.
And we did, we focused on World Kindness Day earlier in the year. So this is kind of a piggyback to that for us. It's kind of like part 2 of kindness. Yeah.
Okay.
Travis?
Heather, what's your general feel as to student morale in terms of dealing with the hybrid learning and all the new norms?
So I hear, I hear mixed emotions at times. I think that students are honestly so grateful to be in school. That is the overall, and it almost, it's overwhelming how many students say on the way into school, I'm so glad it's my day. I'm so happy to be here, and even some students that maybe historically haven't felt that way about school, like I've really seen a shift with that. And the flip side, I think students are tired of COVID. So I had somebody tell me that out at recess today. I'm just so tired of this, So I think that in general, I think that the adult morale probably mimics that too. I think that, teachers, faculty, we are all really happy to be in school, and we are tired of COVID and the protocols. But, I think in a way it has made us students and adults more grateful for our school community. And so I would say that overall, students have done really, really well. But we do have to focus, on remaining grateful. And I think in the wintertime, especially sometimes at this point, we're rounding the corner on getting close to almost a year of working this through. And we are weary. So we really are just focusing on gratitude and things that we can do in our school to keep that morale up for students as well.
And there's couple questions for you, and Mark, this will be the same question for you when it's your time. But wondering about a couple things. One is, have you put any thought into whenever we do move back to 5 days a week, what the transition process will be like for kids? If there's any kind of like things that we're doing to prepare the kids, or things that, you know, the community or the parents can be doing to get kids ready to go back to that 5 day a week. Have you put any thought into that yet? And then I had one other question, but why don't you answer that while I try to remember what that question was?
Yeah, so I think about that a lot, Corey, and I think that it's going to, there's lots of different possibilities in terms of schedule changes, what 5 days a week could be. So I think like, you know, sometimes like if we can regroup just like we were in a normal typical year, without wearing masks, without any, you know, if all of our protocols go to the wayside, that might be one scenario. And if we go back to 5 days a week with what we have right now, that might be a different scenario as well. So it's hard for me in a sense to know how to prepare students until I really know what that would look like. I definitely think that regardless, it would take some change. So I know that at the beginning of this year, when we went to the hybrid model, we did some things like created the video explaining to students, you know, what it would look like, the new normal in school. And I do think that there will have to be some preparation for that. Their family schedules will change a lot because right now they're used to the schedule that they have right now. So I think teachers will have to be really cognizant of that factor as well. But it's hard for me to know how best to prepare students until I really know what that would look like. If it, you know, and honestly, as we have gone to the hybrid schedule, there's been little nuances throughout that we realized that some things we thought were going to be really important that we work with students on weren't, and then other little tiny things were really important. So some of it is like just being able to adjust on the fly as we see what that looks like. Overall, I think it would be a really positive thing because I think although kids have the routine down, I think 5 days a week and having that routine would be a wonderful thing to return to. So I think the benefit would be amazing. So I don't know if that really answers it, but it is something I think about a lot.
And Corey, if I could,
go ahead.
If I could just add on, going back to Jen's advocacy at the state level, we at our superintendent's meeting today, we discussed about what is next year going to look like. We need information from the state and from NYSED exactly what are we going to enter. And we need that information now so we can better prepare from an instructional standpoint, from a social emotional standpoint, and from a budgetary standpoint. Are we still going to be in a hybrid model? Are we still going to be required to have 6 foot of social distancing? Or is it going to be 3 feet of social distancing? All of those questions need to be answered, and we need answers sooner than later so we can better prepare to help answer those questions for our parents and for our students and for our teachers on the delivery of instruction and what is that going to look like.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Yeah, as soon as we can get those answers, I think they'll help parents and community help prepare kids to get ready to come back to school. And then the other thing I was going to mention was also thinking about which of the kids, you've probably seen some kids that are thriving in this environment, maybe kids that have struggled before there might be kids who are doing better. So it'd be interesting to see like, what do we do next year? Even if we went back to like a totally, back to normal classroom, how do we get those kids to be able to carry through that success that they're having to next year while trying to also help those kids who've struggled get back to the normal that they want and that they crave?
Well, and I think, Corey, like we're forever changed by this experience that we've had. So it will be different. We, I think as a school community are at a completely different level technology-wise than we were before. And we've learned a lot of really great things. I don't think we ever would have if we hadn't been kind of forced into this situation. There's pieces that we really want to retain that we've come to figure out that work really, really well. And then there's other parts that we still are scratching our heads and trying to figure out and can't wait just to have kids and, in front of us 5 days a week. So I think that's going to be interesting too, is like to really evaluate what are the things we want to keep, and see that we have seen success with some of the asynchronous learning. I think has been hugely successful for kids that can watch it again, or the parent connections where the parents can be involved at home in a way that maybe they were never able to in a typical school. I mean, we have parents that are really, really involved with the learning and have to be involved with their learning that their children are doing. That's a great thing. We don't want to lose that. We want to retain that. So it is interesting. It will really be interesting to evaluate some of those things. But like Bill said, I think we just are all wondering, what is the impact of the vaccine going to have? We have a lot of questions and just waiting patiently.
And again, at the state level, the state can't wait until late August to deliver our guidance again. We struggled with that last summer. It came at the last minute. We did a wonderful job putting together a reopening plan that has been very successful and is working. However, we can't live through that again this upcoming summer. We need to know, and this is a discussion we had with the superintendents today, we need to know now what we're going to do in the fall so we can prepare and put together and tweak things. Because as Heather said, as hard as this has been, there's been some real opportunities that have come out of this that can be beneficial to our total learning community moving forward. And if we can tweak things and incorporate some of those opportunities to do things more efficiently, to do things that are better for teaching and learning, as long as we know the framework that we are going to be working in now, we can better prepare for that.
Do you have anything else for Heather? We do have a community participation question, Heather, but I'll bring that up when we get to that time. So stand by on that. If everybody else is good, we'll move on to Matt.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everybody. This, unfortunately, will probably be the first of 5 or 6 installments of Matt bearing bad news with regard to the budget and state finances. So we have met, we've been in line sort of right on schedule with our district budget calendar. We've had initial preliminary discussions with all of the department heads and supervisors, both instructional and non-instructional. And, really the message to all of them is to expect a difficult budget process, encouraging them to start thinking about being creative and coming up with maybe unique ways to do things differently and more efficiently. Again, piggybacking off the discussion you folks just had, it's hard to go through a budget process with so many unknowns. So basically, to this point, our discussions have been under the assumption that we would be in normal circumstances in September. So obviously, anytime between now and April, if we find out more that circumstances are different, it's certainly going to have an impact on budget planning. With regard to some of the outside factors, the governor's been slowly releasing his state of the state. We have not seen any executive budget runs yet. And really, there hasn't been any information or any communication regarding state aid in how that's laid out in the executive proposal, or any state aid talks about what's going on in this current year. So, there's been some deducts earlier in the year. But the state budget, the revenue shortfalls with the state budget are still there. Certainly not getting better at this point. So really, there's not much optimism that there's going to be a whole lot coming from the state at this point. The other piece that I can share at this point, which is also a little discouraging, is we're starting to get some of the key components that are involved in the calculation of our tax cap calculation for the district, which is our allowable tax levy. Unfortunately, the statewide growth factor, which is really the baseline at which every school district in the state starts with, and this is, I say this every year, there's that common belief that it's, a 2% tax cap. Well, the statute actually says it's the lesser of 2% in the statewide growth factor. And we just found out yesterday that the statewide growth factor for districts to use in calculating their 21-22 tax levy cap is 1.23%. So we're not starting at 2%. There has been advocacy that districts start at 2% regardless of what that statewide consumer price index measure would dictate. So we did find out that 1.23% is our baseline. We do have a district-specific growth factor that we apply. That's 1.0455. And then we have our capital exclusion. So any of our debt service that's otherwise approved in separate referendum, we can claim an exclusion for that. Based on just plugging in, comparing numbers to prior years and trying to look at what the impact might be, I don't think we're going to get to 2%. I think our maximum allowable levy increase within the confines of the tax cap will be less than 2% this year. So, that's going to make things even harder. So that's about it as far as the budget goes. I know Bill's going to talk about capital project stuff, and he may call on me to jump back in on that. So, but other than that, we're just, support staff, transportation, cafeteria, buildings and grounds. We're moving right along. Everybody's continuing to do what's needed, and we're in good shape. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Anybody have any questions for Matt?
Yeah, Matt, we have a significant amount of more students that are being homeschooled this year from last year. Will that difference in students spike? Will that spike have an effect on our state aid amounts in any way?
I'm not sure. I hope not. I think, in general, if there was a trend in that sense, it would over time. But, I'm sure that's a common theme with school districts around the state this year because of the pandemic. So, I don't think there's not going to be any immediate impact. I don't foresee. And I would hope that all of those types of metrics this year would be treated as the anomaly that they are because of the circumstances. But, in terms of the direct impact on state aid for the current year or the following year, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions for Matt? Thanks, Matt, but please next time bring us a little better information to the next meeting, if you can.
I'll make sure I bring some good news.
Okay, thanks. That brings us to Mark.
That depends on Jen's work now,
right? You just put a lot of pressure on
right? Mark, you're up.
All right. Hello, everybody. Let me just echo a few things that Kevin and Heather said about, this time of year being busy and planning and looking at next year, trying to without some information and trying to plan. So it is a difficult time of year. But, a good news thing would be, before break, the music department put together a nice virtual performance for us. So I, thank them for that. And the secondary 5-week progress reports came out, and traditionally parents were able to access the 5-week progress reports through parent portal. This year, Chris has opened up student portal as well, and he provided students with directions and how they can go into School Tool and look at their progress reports on their own. a big concern that we had is we'd be talking to students, trying to come up with plans for them to improve. And they really didn't know they were doing poorly because they hadn't seen their progress reports. So now they're going to be able to access them. And we provided a bunch of reminders and provided some time in homeroom for those students to be able to access progress reports and come up with plans to work on their grades and things like that. Faculty and staff continue to work with students. As Heather was saying, the students are sick of COVID. They're sick of masks. They're sick of distancing, and the adults are too. But they're still doing a good job. They're still following our protocols and being cooperative. But we just have to remember to keep reminding and stay not become complacent with the protocols we have in place. Counseling department is going to be meeting with students soon to start building schedules for next year. In addition to the report that I already sent you earlier this week, Ms. Daou and a few teachers and myself met with a representative from Mohawk Valley Community College to look at some dual credit opportunities in the upper level courses that we have. So it was a good talk. Their representative was very knowledgeable, and I think that it looks promising. Teachers are going to look at their curriculum and do some alignment and see where things fit and have more conversations with their representative and hopefully move forward with some dual credit courses.
Great, thanks, Mark. And yes, I think although there's fatigue, we've shown the importance of wearing our masks and keeping socially distanced has kept us in school. So I'm thankful for all the teachers to reminding those students that it is really important and it's what's keeping us together as a community in person. So I think that's really important. So thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else have anything for Mark? Actually, Corey, you had a question for him, didn't you?
Just that same question, like what your thoughts are on transitioning kids back just to 5 days a week whenever it happens.
Yeah, and if it were to happen this year, there would be some things internally we would have to do to be able to provide lunch. Would be a big one for us in the secondary because middle school and high school, we'd have to tweak the schedule a little bit for them in order for that to happen with our new hybrid schedule. We'd probably also have some issues with shared staff and specials that may develop, but our teachers have been very flexible and trying to make things work. I think from a student standpoint, it would be a fairly easy transition, except for having to be physically in the building 5 days a week, just because they've had the routine of the asynchronous or online days as well. So they have asynchronous online. They've had a schedule, even though they have those online days. It might not be the exact same schedule, but they're still following a schedule. So I think that's beneficial for us in that sense, that our students would be, just extending those in-person days only a little bit longer. So there'd be some things we'd have to do to adjust to make sure that, everything is covered. And obviously, we wouldn't be able to have the 6 feet distancing. So that would have to go to the wayside in order for that transition to occur this year. But as far as the planning goes, we are planning for 5 days a week next year.
Yeah, and I think maybe just for both of you, this might apply more for the elementary kids, but I think as a parent, it would be really helpful to know, what are the social, behavioral, emotional things that you might expect that you need to get your kid prepared for that they're losing out on. So I think any information we can have sooner rather than later of like, how do you get your kid ready to just be back in school 5 days a week? I mean, some of them, again, I think some of them will do better than others, obviously, but those who are going to struggle are the ones that I'm worried about.
Yeah. And I can kind of see it. You see that same kind of transition after a long break, usually after a summer vacation. A lot of times the kids are really excited to get back in school, see their friends. They haven't seen them for a while. So there is a difference between like a summer vacation and then something like this transitioning back into the 5 days. So definitely. You had asked earlier about, students and their general feeling and morale. And as Heather was saying, you hear from both sides. Some kids are thriving and some kids may be struggling a little bit more. I can tell you from a disciplinary standpoint, I've had very few referrals compared to like last year as far as students acting out in school. So, that's a positive. It shows that when they're in school, they're engaged for the most part within their classes and doing what they need to do. But it is definitely everyone is fatigued, you can see it everywhere.
Mark, do you feel, and Heather, maybe this would be a question for you too, with the way everything went down last year and the chaos that was, and being that we're on a hybrid plan and everybody's finding new ways to deal with this, is there a concern that the teachers aren't able to get in all of the content that they normally would? Are more students falling behind grade level than normally would happen? I don't really know how to word what I'm trying to say, but is it going to take a while to catch up from what was lost?
As a content area teacher myself, it was a struggle to get the AP content in during a normal year. So, teachers are very stressed about that, about getting that much content into that much of time. There are resources. I think our teachers have done a wonderful job with the transition of creating asynchronous opportunities and the synchronous opportunities they have. But then there's also the idea of, are kids safe? Are they comfortable, and are they thinking during the day? Those are really, really important for our kids. And any of the content pieces that may be missing this year can be caught up in the future. But making sure that, you're first making them safe, comfortable, and they're thinking during the day. They're still working their brains. They're kind of like, working out your muscles. You're still working your brain. You're still trying to think about things at a deep level. And we might, in the secondary, with our content-driven courses, there is prioritization that's going to take place, and we aren't going to be able to hit every single thing that we might be able to hit in a normal 180-day year. But I think that's okay too.
Heather, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, so at the very beginning of the school year, one of the things that we really focused on as a faculty was prioritizing the standards, and looked for resources within our BOCES, within some of the curriculum that we use in terms of kind of making a plan for what was most important to touch on this year. So I think that did help somewhat, and just recognizing that it was going to be impossible to cover as much content as we normally do, but also not trying to race through it. So I think what Mark was alluding to there is, really making sure that the content that we are teaching is going in depth enough so that students are able to focus in on doing some deep thinking and having that opportunity to still engage in those good educational practices. I have heard from teachers that they'll say, normally I'm able to be here and now I'm not at this point in the curriculum. So I think that definitely exists. One of the reasons why I really am interested in looking at the ELA and math standardized scores through the NWEA is because it will be, a piece to be able to really just see how much growth kids have made this year, what areas maybe we really need to focus in a little bit more on. So as far, the question, we were talking about so many questions that we still have. And in terms of, we don't have the New York State test results from last year. And we're waiting to see, what's going to happen with that this year. So those are all benchmarks for us to use when we're gauging student growth that we're missing a little bit. So we did have, it was very encouraging in the reading department when we looked at before our break in November, when we did our first benchmark there, we saw a good amount of growth in reading in our students. And so I think that really did help the teachers to feel like, kids are back in school, we're back learning, and they're making up some of that ground that maybe they slid over last spring. So all it points to a positive growth trend. And so it is kind of hard to get a handle on it just because a lot of the metrics that we've always used, we don't have right now. But yeah.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing.
Chris, you're up.
Hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. So the good thing about going last is that I don't need to reiterate everything that's been said before about being super busy. I think everybody did a great job doing that. In the technology department, of course, we've talked about this before. We've had to put some of our forward-thinking, technology integration initiatives sort of on the back burner and really shift into the mode where we do everything that we can possibly do to support the teachers and the parents and the students and the administrators in making sure that they've got whatever they need in terms of software and hardware, and just making sure that everything functions as it should. A couple of positive things that happened since we met last. It looks like Spectrum Internet is expanding in our area because I've had a few students return the hotspots to me, saying that Spectrum was now available in their area and they had purchased it and they were excited that they had gotten it and it was fast and reliable. And so that's a really good thing to happen in our area. We've continued to research and purchase, pieces of software that are going to help make remote instruction and learning more engaging. We just purchased a piece of software for the district called Pear Deck that allows more interactivity with virtual lessons. One thing that's a little troubling is the global pandemic and all of its, it's put a little bit of a damper in our replacement cycle plans. There is a huge shortage in the supply chain of Chromebooks. The plan was, so we replaced half of our aging fleet last year, and the plan was to this year to replace the rest. So some of our students are rocking some older stuff, and I appreciate their patience with that. So hopefully that is going to loosen up. Soon. We have, thanks to Randy and his team, a number of the Promethean boards have gone up in the school. Teachers are very excited about that.
So are the kids. I hear about them every day. They're very cool. Just want you to know that my two children think they're very cool.
Well, we're very excited about that. I think that these pieces of technology, they come with long warranties, and they're going to be great for us in terms of replacing the really, really old stuff that was there before. So I need to get the teachers some professional development, but some of our go-getter teachers, they beat me right to it. As soon as it gets installed in their room, they're like, "Oh my God, I found this Google video, this YouTube video, and now I know how to do everything." So thanks. So our teachers have been really, really amazing in terms of the things that they're learning. They just continue to amaze me with the stuff that they come up with. So that's where we're at. I mean, I'm sure you must have some questions for me.
Chris, how big of a concern is the Chromebook shortage moving forward?
Well, for us, if it lasts a lot longer, it's going to be a concern for us, because the second half, the really old part of our fleet is probably 10 years old, maybe. And so, you've got things like chipped corners, missing keys, and they're just getting slower and Google stopping supporting them. Right now, we've got enough, and we've done a good job repairing them ourselves and keeping hard track of them. But at the rate that some of these older ones are just dying on us, if it lasted into next year, it would be a real worry.
But at what point do we have to start having like a backup plan or alternative solutions?
Right. So I've spoken to, so my representative from the company that we purchased from, I've already placed the order, and I talked to her again just a few weeks ago, and she said, fingers crossed, the distributors say that the supply chain is going to loosen up around April. And so
good luck.
Hopefully we'll get them. Those kids are going to be pumped.
Yes, they are.
When the new ones come in. Yeah.
All right.
Other questions for Chris? Well, thank you.
Sure.
Bill.
Thanks, Michelle. I promise to share all good news. Yeah. So despite the fatigue that everybody is having with COVID, I cannot thank our community, our faculty and staff, and our students for the job they've done following our protocols. And I want you to think about this. We have only had to switch 2 in-person days to virtual days to date. And when you look regionally at some of our surrounding districts that have had in excess of 50 cases, that have been in and out of virtual, in-person, hybrid, we just haven't had that. And that's kudos to everybody involved in our learning community, because really that's incredible. So that's one piece of good news. The second piece of good news, is talking with the Madison County Department of Health on our weekly call today, the trends of positive cases in 7-day averages are trending down. So that's another good piece. And before break, we were teetering on the edge of being a cluster. Actually, a couple of our metrics qualified our region to be identified as a cluster zone, which would involve testing and all sorts of added protocols that we would have had to put in place. So we are not close to that now. We are actually trending away from that. And there was a lot of fear coming out of the holiday break that numbers in our region would continue to rise. And they did. But now they're trending down. So that's encouraging for us. And another piece of encouraging news is that Governor Cuomo has changed the cluster guidance on the COVID testing. So previous to December 4th, if you were designated in an orange or red zone, you were required to close school for 4 days, completely shut down for 4 days and switch to virtual instruction. And then you weren't allowed to reopen it until 100% of your staff was tested and you had negative results. However, that guidance has been loosened. And now if you're in a cluster, schools will remain open. You are to test 20%. There's all different metrics. I won't go into all of them right now, but you have to test 20% biweekly. And then if your infection rate is lower than the regional infection rate, you can continue to stay open and not test. So that's all good news. And that's all a result of they're finding that the data is supporting that schools are safe. And the rate of infection is not happening in schools. And it's a recognition of the low infection rates found in school. And the governor actually put out a quote that I included in your board report that I would like to share publicly because I think it's relevant. As parents know, schools are usually places where illnesses spread easily. But in the case of COVID-19, the safest place in the community is truly the school. That's because schools follow basic rules. The students and teachers wear masks, they practice social distancing, they frequently wash their hands, and many of our students are serious about doing their part to keep their friends and families safe. And I think that's really important. And our mitigation protocols and procedures that our faculty and staff has followed, that our parents have supported, and our students have bought into, have enabled us to stay in person as long as we have, and only switch those 2 in-person days to virtual days. So I think that's really good news, really good news. And now with the vaccine being rolled out, hopefully that will be another layer of mitigation that will allow us to explore bringing kids back more often than we are now. That has not changed the quarantining or contact tracing to date, because there's not enough data right now to support the Department of Health loosening those restrictions. So even though you have been vaccinated, you are still susceptible to a quarantine or isolation. So I think that's important for the public to know as well. Ellen, anything to add on that from your standpoint?
I don't, what do you add to that? There's not a lot to say right now, unfortunately. The vaccine distribution is still a huge unknown. And so everybody wants to know when can we get it? When are we going to get it? When can the teachers get it? When can everybody get it? And that's just a huge question mark right now.
Yeah. So I can share that right now, the Department of Health does not have any vaccines in-house. They actually had to cancel a clinic, and they are not going to use the schools at this time. They're not going to do a mass vaccination in schools. So they're still using their satellite vaccination sites, and we're encouraging our staff to go to those vaccination sites and get vaccinated, because we don't know when or how we can do some mass vaccination for our staff. So we are encouraging, and we've had a number of staff already have their first dose, and a number of our staff have appointments to be vaccinated. So interesting, I got a call this afternoon from Walgreens from Canastota, and they asked if we would be interested, if they get a supply of vaccinations, would we be interested in vaccinating our staff at their site? And absolutely, the answer was yes. So we are on their list. And so as soon as we get a call from them that they have the available vaccinations, we will notify our staff that that's another outpost site that they can go to. So that's encouraging.
I did just hear too that Kinney's in Hamilton has them now, and that they actually had appointments. I just saw that.
They had been limited to only being able to immunize those over the age of 75.
75, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that was the information given to us as well. If you're 75 and older, you can go to Kinney's. More good news, exciting news in regards. Go ahead, Ellen. Sorry.
I'm glad they have doses, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on that topic, I'm just wondering, so this is, I think I know the answer, but just so that it's on the record and anybody watching knows. And so if anybody asks, I have the right answer. If all the staff were vaccinated, let's say, whenever that happens, we know that everybody's vaccinated, all the staff, obviously only. Is that good enough to say now we can go back to a 5-day-a-week schedule? Or are there other factors that we're looking at? And if so, what are the other factors we're looking at? I assume we're looking at community spread being way down, and all sorts of other things. So what are we thinking about in terms of what are the indicators to say that we could go back to a 5-day-a-week schedule?
So even though you're vaccinated, you're not immune to the virus. So there's still that uncertainty. There's still the requirements from the CDC and state ed of the 6-foot social distancing, the masking. So logistically, there are many things that we still have to consider. Our goal remains bringing kids back 5 days a week, but we have to do that within the guidelines that are presented to us. I think that's another layer of mitigation, obviously, but it is not the end all at this point.
So So can I sort of clarify a little bit about the vaccine? So the evidence, the data we have right now from the vaccines, they're saying that they're 95% effective. They're 95% effective at preventing significant symptomatic disease or symptomatic disease. Neither of the trials did a really good job of looking at whether or not they prevented asymptomatic disease. So what we do not yet know is if people who are immunized can be asymptomatic carriers of the disease and then still transmit it. I'm hopeful that very soon we will have some of that information because the data that was used to approve these was from November. So we have another several months worth of data that they've been gathering, and it became apparent that that was sort of a missing piece of information, but we don't have that yet. And so that's sort of the reluctance to just saying, okay, we can, everybody's vaccinated, we can go back to normal, is the concern that for the potential for asymptomatic spread. So what the vaccines prevented was symptomatic disease and severe disease. It prevented the ICU hospitalizations and that sort of stuff. We don't know if it prevents asymptomatic spread. And so that's the piece that's missing. And so it's a little more data, a little more time, more waiting.
And as far as this idea of going back is concerned, is that a decision that we can make at a local level? Is that one that gets made at a state level? Or are we thinking like this has to be like a CDC guidelines being eased back? Like so I'm saying, is there a potential that we could see things getting much better in our local or even regional community, but still not being able to go back because there's other regulations in place that we can't?
I mean, I think the biggest one right now is the 6 feet distancing, right? I mean, we don't have the space for that 6 feet to be reduced. Isn't that correct?
That is one factor, yes. And it is a local decision, Corey.
Okay.
Anything else before I move on to the capital project? So really exciting news with the capital project. We are moving into phase 2, which is door hardware, security, new doors, and locking systems. But the real exciting news is that we are now planning phase 3 of the project. And, phase 1, although was much needed, it wasn't very glamorous. We do have a new roof. We have heating and ventilation. We have a beautiful marquee out in front, which is wonderful. But you're going to see now as we plan phase 3, much more aesthetically appealing upgrades. It will be visual. People will be able to see the actual upgrades. So we are talking about reimagining some learning spaces, particularly the LGI and potentially the library, incorporating that into a 21st century learning space. We're talking about our life skills lab. If you're in the school right now, we have a very small room that we use for our family and consumer science class for the cooking. And we're looking at reimagining that space to a life learning lab, a life skills lab. We're talking about recurbing the bus circle and doing some repaving and curbing and possibly expanding that footprint so we can fit 2 cars through much easier than it is right now. Some upgrades in our elementary 3rd, 4th wing, our elementary music room, giving that an upgrade. So there's some really exciting ideas that we're starting to plan with our architects. Part of the administrative team went to VBS this week. VBS has just completed a phase of their capital project where they reimagined a large footprint of their building that connects their middle school to their high school. And it is absolutely beautiful and really exciting. And it's all based around 21st century learning. It's very wide open. There's movable walls, there's glass, there's flexible multifunctional seating, there's technology, there's a media center. So we went and visited that, and King & King Architects, who are our architectural firm, actually designed that at VBS. So we went and visited, and it was quite impressive. And so we're starting to put together teams internally in our district to start the collaborative process on reimagining some spaces within that phase 3 of the project, which would be summer of 22. And next month, we'll give you a very detailed report on what that would look like. But I just wanted to give a brief overview of the excitement that's going to be coming as far as the capital project is concerned. And the opportunity to reimagine and kind of redesign some of our space within the building that is outdated, and it needs to be updated, and reimagining learning spaces for our students and for our faculty and staff to teach and learn in is really exciting. So Matt, is there anything else you want to add in regards to phase 3?
No, just with regard to the actual spaces that are going to be addressed, the locker rooms also in the middle school. Those locker rooms in the middle high school are original to the building from the 50s. So I believe a couple of projects, a couple of the last projects, that's been one of the last things left out. So that's exciting. And then, like Bill said, we can give you an update next month, a more extensive update. Also kind of summarizing phase 1 and phase 2, what was done, what's going to be done in phase 2, but also what was originally planned. I know Ellen had inquired about what going back now 2.5 years, what the phases looked like then, what we've been able to get done compared to what we had originally anticipated. So that's something we can definitely do for the February meeting. Mark and Heather and Chris, but mostly Mark, has been in the process of getting faculty members. We're going to create teams to meet with the architects, because really they want feedback from the faculty that's going to be utilizing these spaces. So we're in the process of setting that up. So it's very exciting.
Anything the admins that went to VBS want to add about what you saw and what that potentially could look like at HCS? Or we can wait until next month. It's fine either way.
I'll just reiterate that, it was beautiful. It really was. And you see a space like that, you just start thinking about all the possibilities. It really starts you thinking about ways that you can teach things differently and get you excited. And even in this time when everybody's down, it's something about a nice space like that really kind of picks you up a little bit. So I'm glad I got to go to see it.
Do you have any questions for Bill up to this point?
Yeah, I got a few.
Go ahead, Travis.
So that's all encouraging. And Matt, I'm sure you'll have to chime in for some of this too. I have some concerns with some of the estimates that we have for phase 3. Some of them just seem outrageously high at first glance. But again, I know how these things work, so I kind of get it. But I just want to make sure that our taxpayers are getting their money's worth. So I could go over a couple examples with you. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but I feel that we need to push back a little bit and make sure we're not getting hosed on a few things. I don't know how you would.
Well, Travis, it's so preliminary at this point. I mean, these are just for those of you to give you some context. The estimates that are being used, these are figures that the architect is a couple things. Number one, the bids, it's all done in accordance with the law, general municipal law and bidding. The bids won't even this work won't even be bid out until probably a year from now. And it's for work that's going to be done 18 to 24 months from now, the bulk of that work. So, with regard to that, your comment about making sure the taxpayers, there's some integrity there. The last thing that can happen with these projects is that the scope of work and the costs associated with that scope of work exceeds what was authorized with the vote back in 2018. So based on that, these estimates are very conservative. There's a 20% allowance for contingency items. There's a 20%, I think, for incidental items. And then they also use an escalation factor for inflation for pricing. So this is very typical for these types of things with school projects. The ball has to get rolling for SED approval prior to all the bidding taking place. So we are right on schedule. And I think this is why if we show you what, if you look at phase one, what these prices were back when phase one we got the ball rolling with phase one. Initially we had talked about doing roughly 50% of the roof in phase one. And based on favorable bidding, based on escalation factors that didn't come to fruition, we were able to do the whole roof in phase one. So ultimately what will happen is if these figures are not accurate, which in all likelihood, many of them will be overstated at this point, we'll be able to expand the scope of work that we complete. So there's nothing, yes, many of these numbers may jump off the page as seeming significantly high, but it's nothing out of the ordinary at this point.
And I get.
And I don't, if there's specific items on, I can't speak to them directly right now. I'm not prepared to do that. And I would probably, involve King and King for further explanation, but we can certainly do that if there's certain things you want to look at.
Yeah. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're being treated fairly in the process. Not that King and King isn't. It just, we have to be smart with the money that we have been authorized to spend. And we need to make that known is all. And I'm not saying anybody's not doing that. I'm just, some of it caught me off guard, and I understand that it hasn't been bid yet. Can you speak to, you guys mentioned some of the things that are in the general scope of the work. What is this about a review impact of future bus garage demo?
So one of the things that's always been sort of on the back burner at HCS. I'm sorry, Bill, do you want me to?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
So one of the things that's always been discussed is the traffic pattern, the congestion. But also one of the things that we've sort of identified is that we are questioning and we're reviewing is two things: the location of and the current functionality of the district bus garage. It's not in an ideal location. It's right in the middle of the parking lot, which contributes to the congestion problem. The other thing, that originally the bus garage, that structure, and a considerable part of it was used as instructional space. And that's not the case anymore. Years ago, the Ag and Tech department operated out of that building, where the outdoor locker rooms are currently. So one of the things that we've identified is a potential, and again, this is a long-term, this would be future project, and to the extent it would be done, we're not sure. Do we need a bus garage of that size, functioning in that sense, sitting right in the middle of our parking lot? So one of the possibilities would be to remove that bus garage to free up the space and come up with an alternative structure in the back, where there's currently a barn and where our gas pumps are. So it's just very, very early stages of possibility long-term as far as the location and functionality of that structure.
And I want to be real clear that that's not included into this project. That would be a future project.
Yeah, I understood that. I just was caught off guard. Thank you, guys.
Bill, did you have anything else in your?
Yeah, I have one more piece of good news, if I could.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So our fifth grade teachers and students, when they were talking about empathy and being empathetic to our world and our community, did a letter writing campaign and to our healthcare workers. And this was shared with Community Memorial staff And I want to share some of the letters that were written because they're really touching. I think it's heartfelt. It encompasses what our students embody as far as understanding and being empathetic to the world and to our community. So here's the first. Dear frontline workers, 2020 has been hard for everyone, especially you. Putting your life at risk to save others is something not many of us have the guts to do. I know it's hard watching people getting sick right before your eyes, but even though you may sometimes feel helpless, deep down in my heart, I know you do everything you can to save that person. You know, before we used to think that characters like Batman and Spider-Man were great heroes, but the truth is the real heroes are you. And even though 2020 has been rough, I'm glad we could learn something. I don't want to be a doctor when I grow up. I simply can't see people suffer. I'm too emotional, but seeing someone as strong as you makes me think that a doctor or nurse doesn't just help someone, they befriend someone. Every person, patient, and people who you have helped are not someone, they are your friends. Being a doctor or nurse is not just dealing with blood, it's about being there for friends and family. And the whole world is so proud of you, proud that you don't give up even after dealing with this for about a year, proud that you can still stay strong, and proud that even after such a sad time, you still make friendships. So that's one. The second, thank you, doctors and nurses. Dear doctors and nurses, there have been so many cases of COVID-19 and people have been sick and you've been there to help them. You've tried to help them and save their lives. You've been around people with diseases, but that did not stop you from doing your job. You went into work knowing that you were going to be dealing with people suffering right in front of you, and you knew that patient was not your last. You've gone into work for about a year with COVID going on, and you never gave up, and you were there for those people. When I grow up, I want to be a nurse and save people's lives and take care of them like you doctors and nurses do. I have always appreciated the way that you guys are always there with the people and are always willing to do anything to help them. Whether that means drawing blood to save their lives or donating your kidney, your doctors and nurses do the things that are unexpected every day. We think you're doing something amazing and then poof, something new that you do to help others. That is always how I think of you, lifesavers, not the candy. And the last, dear healthcare workers, thank you for helping others that are sick or have corona in the hospital and risking your lives to help others. These are tough times we're going through right now, and we're all in this together. Workers, thank you for helping our community. We will get through this together. So those were just 3 samples of the letters that the 5th graders sent out, and I thought they were really special, and it just embodies what our students and what our faculty and staff represent to our community. So that is my report.
I just want to share about that. I actually reached out to Bill to ask him about those because I found out about them at the Community Memorial Hospital medical staff meeting. Somebody, so that's most of the primary care physicians and several of the hospital staff and nurses are at those meetings. And somebody specifically mentioned those letters and how absolutely touching they were. I do believe there were some tears involved for many of the people who read them. So it was really, it was truly appreciated. And so I hope that finds its way back to the kids too.
Absolutely.
I feel like we shouldn't, have more meeting after that because that was just really good. So thank you for sharing that. And now I have to move on with the meeting. So it's steering team updates. Jen.
Okay, I had some good stuff, but it can't compete with that. Sorry. So we met on December 21st. We spent some time talking about the HCS Reads project and keeping that mainly to the elementary grades this year due to some lack of interest. And it's really hard to find a book to encompass all grade levels. We've talked a lot about the Positivity Project and went through the topics for the rest of the year and found some good activity ideas off biglifejournal.com. that I think Heather is going to be utilizing with the faculty and staff to encompass activities actually into the Positivity Project topics. Talked about making HCS reads a little more encompassing this year by having chapters read by members from the community and adding those actually to the websites with possibly a blog and some pictures. We talked about a Big Brother, Big Sister project with some like tutoring and virtual support and things like that, where they could actually encompass National Junior Honor Society and National Honor Society, and really making those connections between our elementary school and our middle and high school. And then we talked about the Liberty Kids project that was done through the Cove, and possibly we came up with Brain Buddies. I don't know if that is going to stick or not, but that was the title that really stuck out to a lot of us, and possibly like having Colgate students work with our high school students in like a homework club kind of setting. And Capri was going to reach out to the Cove to kind of start that process. I guess the Liberty Kids project that they did was really well received. So trying to get those Colgate students who want to be involved, who usually come into our school that haven't been able to, being able to get them involved virtually.
Thanks, Jen. Elementary steering. That was secondary, right? Elementary, Corey. The other way around.
This is high school.
Elementary.
Yeah.
You said something about.
So we have been. Yeah, we have been continuing to work on the alumni survey that we're putting together. So we're trying to really refine that and make that the most useful we can. So we're doing a couple things. One, I know Mark and Chris have been working together to think about the implications of gathering and storing that data. So trying to make sure the legal aspect of that is all worked out, so that we have a disclaimer about how that data is going to be used and who's going to be able to access it before anybody takes the survey. So we got to make sure that we're legally covered on that end. So they're working on that end. And then we're also reaching out to a couple of experts in sociology and in the registrar's office at Colgate who do a lot of these surveys and are experts in that field, to also help us kind of think about the best ways to craft the survey in a way that's going to elicit the most amount of responses, but also give us the data that we need. So we're still we're really fine tuning this because we want it to be something that can be useful for not just this year, but maybe going forward. This is like the type of survey where we can give it to, every year, give it to a certain number of classes. So we have, maybe every year it's to, the 5-year class and the 10-year class, right? Or whatever so those are the kind of details we're trying to figure out what's going to be the most useful way to use this survey. So that's really what we're trying to iron out. Then we've also been talking about what Jen talked about is trying to find ways for the National Honor Society, National Junior Honor Society to continue to reach out to other students and help them out, and sometimes pairing with the elementary students even to figure out ways that we can get kind of student tutoring. So we talked about finding spaces for them that are not, it was a lunchroom, right, Mark, that was the one spot so far, but it's not necessarily the best spot, is that right? So trying to find the different spots that they can do these things safely, distance, but also in a comfortable way.
And supervised too as well in those areas. We do have a high school student that's really reached out to National Honor Society advisor and is trying to get the ball rolling with the logistical side of things. So, from the elementaries, if the elementary steering team could reach out to me, I can hook you up with that student as well. She's done a really good job this year with trying to get things together.
Yeah. So that's our update.
Great, thank you. Emerald Foundation update is me. Let me make my notes. They welcomed a new member to their foundation since Sally left. Jill Baker, Hamilton class of 86, is now a member of the Hamilton Foundation. So we welcomed her, and we're excited that she's part of that. They went over their fundraising appeal that they sent out. They got a pretty good response, which is great. But they are still hoping that more Hamilton alum and others contribute so that they can help Hamilton in any way that's needed. They did approve one grant, and that grant person has been notified. And they're hoping that anybody else has any ideas, teacher-wise, or whatever at school, could get in touch with them if they need something. So if something's needed, the Emerald Foundation is there, and they want to make sure that everybody remembers that they're there and to fill out the application and submit it. Their next meeting is the Monday before our next meeting. So I think that puts it at February 8th.
I just wanted to, Michelle, just to pass along, obviously thank the Emerald Foundation for all they do all the time. But with this last one that went through as a science person, it's not only going to be useful for delivery of instruction within the classroom, but it's going to give our students a leg up on other students being able to use something like this once they're.
Do you want to say what it is? I don't think everybody knows.
Yeah. So it's going to be a lab equipment device. The exact name, I would have to go look at the paper again. But
spectrometer, maybe something like that.
It's specialized in a certain way, but for our students to be able to use that, we were borrowing one for a little bit from Colgate. But to have one here that the students can use, it'll be something that will make them marketable to be able to manipulate that technology.
Spectrophotometer.
Yeah.
Sounds like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, exactly.
It must have cost money because Matt knew the name.
So anyways, submit applications to the Emerald Foundation, and they'll review them as they get them. PTO update. I am sorry. I'm publicly sorry to the PTO. I did not reach out to the PTO to ask them for an update, and so I have no update for them. But if they have one and they'd like to send it in, we can get it in our notes or something to that effect. So sorry, and I will do better next month. It brings us to knowledge sharing. Does anybody have anything this month for knowledge sharing? I see some no's. 3, 4 no's. Okay, and I've got no. So, Corey?
I was going to ask with that, there's been a lot of different things coming through email about different NYSBA meetings. Did we want to talk, were there any of those that we thought would be important to go to? And do we want to talk about maybe somebody going to any of those? Some of there's the couple that seemed really important. I don't know if Jen's going to go to, but there's a meeting with the delegates, the state assembly and the state senate candidates coming up. I think one of them I couldn't go to. The other one I might be able to.
I think the same for me. I think the dates didn't work for me, so I didn't look at it further, but we can.
Yeah,
maybe I'll just check with Jen. Maybe I'll just text you later, Jen, and we can, like, if you can go to those, I'll let you go. If you want to switch with me, if you want to split those up somehow, I'd be happy to help out with that as well.
That sounds great. That would be good.
Thank you. That does bring us to community participation, and we have one. So Heather, this goes to you. But as I'm reading that and Heather's responding, if anybody else has anything, please type in the chat feature now so that we can be ready to read it when it's time. We had a question. Ms. Thomas mentioned some additional reading assessments. Will HCS continue to work with remote families to conduct assessments remotely?
Yes, so we actually have been able to implement the NWEA remotely. So the remote families, the students in grades 2 through 5 can actually do that from their home. So that was a huge new piece that we did this year. And then the benchmark assessments are the informal reading assessments do have to be done in person. And so those have been set up on the remote days with either their classroom teacher or the reading teacher or the special education teacher. And that plan will still continue this time as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to just wait a minute to see if any of the people watching have anything else that they'd like to add to community participation. While we do that, while we wait, we will be headed into exec session next, and there will be no voting when we come out of executive session. So we will not come back live on YouTube after that. So I just wanted everybody to know that we will not vote in exec session. I still don't see any other comments in the chat function. So I think we're good to say thank you to everybody. And I need a motion. I need a motion to adjourn to executive session where we will discuss the employment history of particular individuals.
Michelle, if I could just add, we'll also discuss both SEIU and HTA negotiations.
Okay.
I'll move.
I'll second.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and stay safe out there.
Heather, Mark, Kevin, and Matt, would you please stay on?